Hello everyone, you're listening to YoRadio.com with DJ Sakara, and you guys are stuck with me for another 2 hours of our weekly community interviews, and I hope you're going to have a great time. I believe we're going to have a really, really good interview today. We are receiving the Syndicate Guild of Atlantic, better known as LLTS, and we have their guild master and one of their squad leader, I believe. Geez, I'm sorry, my brain is still trying to recover from getting eaten so much by the zombies on the Shard of Death. So our guests are Dragons, the GM of LLTS, and one of his squad leaders, Amanda Reckonwith. I hope I pronounced the name right. And Amanda is actually a guy, so I'm going to have them each introduce themselves so that you guys can get a little more familiar with their voices. So, Dragon, if you want to say hello to everybody.
Hi, everybody. This is Dragons.
And Amanda, if you want to go ahead.
Good afternoon.
So these are our guests for today, and as usual, we have Viceroy that's lurking around to pester us during the interview and to ask some of his infamous questions, which will come on later on today. And so starting off, my first question, I guess, will go to you, Dragons, as the GM of the Guild. Are you the founder of the Syndicate? And if yes, what inspired you to create that guild?
Yeah, I founded it about 10 years ago or so. What led to it was, at the time I was playing betas for a number of early MMOs, and there just weren't really any good guilds out there that were worth being a part of. I was in several at the time that all just seemed to collapse in on themselves, and they didn't seem to stick around very long. So after getting bored of guild after guild collapsing, I decided to go ahead and put one together myself and see if we could make it work.
So at the time, you were not even playing UO when you created LLTS. You were just beta testing various games?
Yeah, it actually predated UO coming out. It was back when UO was in the alpha phases, and there was a brief alpha test. And prior to that, there was Meridian 59 was in its beta test. The Realm was in its beta test. And there was a number of people playing Neverwinter Nights over on America Online. And I was playing all those off and on and had been in several guilds there.
Wow. And so when UO actually got off the ground, you guys just basically tried it out also and ended up staying around here?
Yeah, when I formed the guild, it was we'd heard about UO was coming up. I had played in the alpha test, and we formed the guild with the intent of playing Ultima Online for a long time. By the time the game even started up, we were several hundred members strong. So we'd been around for quite some time, although guilds back then were certainly a lot different than they are today, with just simply because people hadn't been around massively multiplayer games before. So there was certainly a lot different atmosphere back then with guilds than it was today.
So let me understand this. When you guys actually came into UO, how many members did you actually have?
By the time UO started, we had somewhere around 250.
Holy cow. And did all these people actually come into UO with you, or just some of them, and the others continued on with whatever other games you were playing at the time?
No, they all joined specifically because they wanted to be part of UO.
Oh, wow. And so today, I guess, what are your numbers today? Are we still talking about the same kind of figures, or has that decreased over the years?
Currently, we have about 580 people in the guild.
And is this all people playing Ultima Online, or are you taking into account people from various games?
It's actually split between three things. We have about 220 people that play Ultima Online. We have about 250 or so people that play World of Warcraft. And there's 50 or 60 people that either play both or help us in our beta testing of other games. We work with a number of developers to test games. They'll invite us to come out in large numbers and give them a test. And we have some people that do that. And we have some people that are just kind of currently inactive, not playing any game. Maybe that's due to school or real life, or they're just burnt out on games. So we have a few of those on the roster as well.
That's quite a few people to deal with. And I was crying because I had like 200 people to handle. Wow, my hat off to you. But and so on your daily basis, what kind of a guild is LLTS in Ultima Online?
It's well, it participates in all aspects of the game. I mean, we have people that play merchant characters full time. We have people that PvP almost all the time. We have people that do champ hunts, people that do treasure map spawns, a lot of people that just go out and hunt together. I mean, our focus is more of a friend-focused guild, not, we're not a PvP guild, we're not a power gamer guild. We focus on the friends first, and everything else just seems to fall into line after that.
So you're really not like most other guilds that have very specific goals. It's pretty much you guys do whatever you want, as long as you follow the guild rules.
Yeah, our focus is on ourselves. It's on, having a good time, building a community. I mean, more than 80% of our 550 members have actually been with us for anywhere from 1 year to almost 10 years. So our focus is really on ourselves and on our community. And within that, I mean, we certainly have rules like we don't p-kill, we don't cheat, we don't use exploits, that kind of thing. But as long as you stick within the rules, it's pretty wide open. I mean, we have so many people that there's something in the guild for everybody. So.
And what about your recruiting policies? Because I play Atlantic myself, and I've often seen your recruitment books. I'm trying to remember. I think you guys drop those about once a week or something like that. I've never really read one of them in depth. I kind of just quickly had a look at it since I run my own guild. Obviously, I'm not looking to join any other guild. But can you give us a little bit of an insight on how your recruiting works?
Sure. Those books actually aren't necessarily recruiting books. They're more of a kind of getting the word out on things we do. For example, each week we run a weekly event called Craftsman Day, and the book has a whole section on that and how people can get involved in that. And it talks about our lotteries and the treasure map rune library. So it's more or less it's a way for us to easily communicate lots of things that we have going on rather than spamming the message boards or the news sites. It just helps us keep word out on miscellaneous events. But specifically in terms of recruiting, our policy is pretty much that we will only consider somebody to join if we know them very well. Since we are a friend-focused guild, having a referral from somebody that we know well, that we get along with, that lots of members know, is basically a requirement to get into the guild. Beyond that, it varies from time to time as to whether or not we're recruiting at all. If we have more than enough people that are active and playing right now, then we might not be recruiting at all. Certainly UO has its ups and downs, and during the down times for UO, it's certainly easier to get in terms of us having openings. So once you get to know members, there's going to be more chances of getting in. When things are hot and heavy and there's tons of people out there, frankly, with 550 members, we don't really need to recruit a ton of new ones. But we're always on the lookout for basically people that we're friends with. I mean, it all boils down to we're a guild of friends. We like hanging out with our friends. We don't specifically go out hunting for people, per se, to join. We go out looking to make friends with people. And when we become good friends with somebody and we get to know them, we like to have them on board with us.
Alrighty. And question for you. Do you have any formal alliances currently? Because it seems to be the new trend. Every guild and their brother is allying with each other. So does LLTS actually have any official alliances? Are you agreeing to anyone? Or do you have any form of informal alliances where you basically work hand in hand with other guilds but aren't necessarily agreeing to them?
We currently don't have any alliances declared on our stone, whether it's our war stone or our main stone. Informally, we're a pretty friendly guild. I mean, if people don't attack us, we're not going to attack them. If somebody's doing a champ spawn and they want help, we get asked a lot of times, hey, can you come help us out in our champ spawn? And if we have members online, they'll run over and help out. Maybe that's killing the spawn or fighting off the PKs or trying to anyway. But yeah, we're a pretty friendly guild, and we'll work with just about anybody that's looking to have a good time, but we don't have any formal alliances, no.
Is this, is this really by choice or just because you haven't found a guild that would complement yours enough that you would actually want to go green to them?
Probably more by choice. In the early days of UO and gaming, alliances were all the rage, and we had lots of these, official alliances, so much so that we had a web page up listing all the cool other guilds that were our buddies, and none of them exist anymore. So, I mean, they didn't offer us any value back then. We haven't found one lately that's been of value to us to add, simply because when you have 200 plus people that play, that use IRC together, that are online all the time together, you don't have a whole lot of stuff that you actually need. So by choice, I guess, is probably the best answer. We just haven't really had the need to make alliances yet.
And so you mentioned that you guys do champ spawns from time to time, but how much do you guys actually venture and sell? Is it really a large proportion, or would you have to say it's fairly random? I think Amanda wants to comment on that. Go ahead, Amanda.
Thank you. By the way, your pronunciation was exact. It's Amanda Reckonwith, which was taken from Garrison Keeler, so I want to mention that, lest I infringe on rights. We, in the last 9 months, initially, before I joined the guild, they were involved in Felucca. They got away from it, but recently we've ventured into it again, mainly through champ hunts, and we hang out at U-Gate, do PvP. I think it's something that we probably had not really saw a need to do, because a lot of our members are older. That aspect of the game is not that crucial to them, but now we're getting more involved in champ spawns and PvP, etc.
So yeah, because I did notice that LLTS is a bit more present in Felucca than you used to be. So I was kind of wondering if that's a trend that we will be seeing you guys pursue, or if it was just kind of like, let's go try it out and then just a temporary thing or whatever. Yes,
you'll probably see us doing that. You'll probably see us doing that even more in the future. In the past, I mean, UO's had its ups and downs in terms of Felucca. In the early days, I mean, that's all there was, and we were there all the time. Factions came out. We participated in those extremely heavily for months on end, but frankly, they got boring. I mean, factions are the same old thing every week, so we are hot and cold on factions. It comes and goes. Sometimes our stone is real busy. Sometimes it's not. And it really runs hot and cold. For a long time, we did champ spawns, and then we didn't do them for months on end. Then we now have Amanda. He's actually one of my squad leaders, as well as our champ spawn coordinator, and he runs multiple hunts a week. And so I think you'll see us in there for as long as it remains interesting and compelling to do so. But like all aspects of UO, it has its ups and downs, and frankly, there are times when running around Felucca is rather boring.
Unfortunately, I know all too well what you mean on that one. But you did mention you have a Warstone, and from what you just said, I'm assuming you mean it's a faction stone. So you basically have a faction division in LLTS.
That's correct. We do have a faction stone, and it varies in terms of its size. Sometimes there's 5 or 10 people busy on it. Sometimes there's 20 or 25 people. And again, it runs hot and cold with with the rise and fall of PvP. I think a lot of the people that want to be on the faction stone right now are simply waiting for the PvP changes to come to pass and see if that kind of revitalizes factions and makes it interesting for them.
And you guys were actually, the first time we talked, you mentioned that LLTS is actually a dictatorship and not a democracy. Would you like to expand a little bit on that? What, and why would you choose that format, I guess, of leadership versus democracy?
Well, yeah, it is a dictatorship. We term it a benevolent dictatorship, and the reason we call it that is simply because although I do make all the final decisions, it isn't done in a vacuum, because really ultimately the members decide whether or not the guild is going in the direction they want it to, and if it's not, then they leave. So it really does, although it is a dictatorship, there really is a heavy element of feedback and doing what's the correct thing for the guild and what the majority of members want to have happen. The reason we chose that format is back when we first created the guild, there weren't that many guilds around. Guilds were rather uncommon. The internet itself was fairly new to most people. So there weren't a whole lot of other models to go after. So I'd picked that model. I got tired of being in guilds that were led by councils that couldn't get anything done. So I picked that model and ran with it. The reason we stuck with it over time is simply because it works out really well. Ultimately, if a bad decision is made, I'm accountable for it. If a good decision is made, well, it's based on team feedback, so we all kind of revel in that. But it gives us a sense of accountability. It gives us a chain of command. I have different leaders that are under me that have different levels of authority in different areas of the guild. And it enables us to make decisions and move forward and not stagnate with the inability to rapidly respond to a situation.
That's actually food for thought. And I know what you mean when you do have a council sometime to rely on, things can take quite a bit of time to actually get done, whereas sometimes when you just make a unilateral decision, it just helps resolve certain situations faster. But there definitely is the aspect of accountability when you basically make that decision without consulting others. But obviously it has worked very well for you guys, and you guys continue to thrive, so you must be doing something right. Now, for a long time, your guild had a 4-letter guild abbreviation, still do, but it was a rare trademark of the syndicate. And I could never help but wonder, how did you guys feel when I think that was with AOS, when it was made possible for just about any guild to have the 4-letter abbreviation?
Yeah, that did tend to annoy me just a tad. It's great that everybody can have longer abbreviations, and it was pretty cool for a while to be one of the few. I think there was only 2 or 3 on it, a 4-letter or longer abbreviation, and there weren't very many across UO. So it was a pretty neat, fairly unique type thing. But yeah, it was rather annoying when that did get changed.
I can imagine. Viceroy wants to say something. Go ahead.
Yes, I actually got a question for you guys, and it's with regards to your guild and everything. First of all, what does LLTS stand for in terms of abbreviations and everything? Because, I don't really see how it can, equal to the syndicate or whatever. I guess the TS could be the syndicate, but what about the LL? And also, my second question is, weren't you guys originally, or did you guys ever play on Chesapeake by any chance? Because I could have swore I've seen a guild called the syndicate before on Chesapeake before, or have you guys always played on Atlantic?
First question, LLTS stands for Long Live the Syndicate. That's kind of our trademark slogan that we've had, since we were in UO. Early in the game, we actually made all of our characters with LLTS in the name. That was before they even added guild logic to the game. And it's kind of our battle cry, our motto, it's our greeting. We shout it a lot. Second question, no, we've never been on Chesapeake. We've only existed on Atlantic. kind of my philosophy there is our purpose as a guild is to be a team of friends. It is difficult to be buddies with somebody who's on a completely different server than you are. You really don't get the chance to build that friendship with them and spend that time hunting with them. Sure, you can trade posts on a forum and you can both say you're members of the guild, but really you're not building the kinds of relationships that we do in our guild. So we always exist on Atlantic Shard.
My next question for you is regarding the changes that have come in UO especially since AOS, I'd have to say. Do you think these changes have helped your guild prosper, or has it, in a way, driven people to play a bit more of a solo playstyle? And by this I mean, back in the days, people seem to be really more of a community, and I know that this is what the dev team is really pushing towards. But for guilds like yours that aren't really doing one thing specific, that are basically doing pretty much whatever people want to do as a group or individually, the fact that the game has become so item-based, I guess, have you seen a change in the way your members interact, or has that really not done much of a difference for you guys?
Well, back when AOS came out, the game up to that point, and even including that expansion, was pretty solo-focused. But when Mondane's Legacy came out, in my opinion, a lot of that has changed. To defeat some of the Mondane's Legacy content, they intentionally design it so that you need a group of people to do it. So that has focused a lot more attention on the team play aspect. So internally in our guild, we certainly have people that enjoy solo content. We also do a lot of group content. I mean, intentionally we do lots of group hunts every week. We have multiple recurring scheduled events where the sole purpose is to get together as a group and do it. Sure, we all spend a lot of time out there solo hunting and getting gold and getting items and that kind of thing, but we do, whether it's champ spawns or doom hunts or treasure map hunts or just group hunts to go out and do things, we've always had a pretty important focus on the team aspect. But UO as a whole, there was a lot more solo play up until recently. With the recent expansion, it's pretty much forced people into working more as a group if you really want to achieve a lot of that content.
This part I kind of agree with, but at the same time, well, that's another debate altogether, but at the same time, I find that once you've mastered the way of doing it, you can actually do it with increasingly smaller numbers, and I see a lot of people actually doing it specifically with small numbers so that they can get more of the loot for themselves. So I kind of have mixed feelings about the whole thing, but like I said, that's another debate altogether. Sorry. Okay, the next question, and you can just quickly go over it if you want. We don't need to go in depth since we're really more talking about UO. But just quickly, what other games do you guys currently play as a guild other than UO?
Currently, our other main focus is World of Warcraft. We're probably about half the guild is in that, and kind of a sub-focus there would be beta testing different games. It's certainly a quieter time in the beta test right now. We have several people doing D&D online, but those come and go in waves, and we'll have times where there's 50, 100, maybe 200 members that have been invited into a beta to test that out for people. But right now, our primary focus is UO, World of Warcraft, and a little bit in the beta testing area.
And you talked quite a few times about events that you guys organize. Before we go into the real-life events, can you tell us a bit about what kind of in-game events you guys do? And are these focused towards your members, or are they focused at the community at large?
We have a little of both. Internal to the guild, we do things like champ spawns. We have, once a week, we have a big treasure map solving event. We have a number of internal guild hunts that occur several days a week. We have one day a week we go out and hunt with people that are recruits that want to join the guild. So we do a lot of internal things. To the community, we're a real big believer that if you keep the community strong, that keeps UO strong, and in turn that benefits us. So it's definitely, to our advantage and to all players' advantage to do things that benefit the community. So we do have a number of recurring events we do there as well. Each week on Sundays, we do a Craftsman Day event, which was one we're actually kind of proud of, because when we started about 8 years ago, there was no such event. And these days, there's Craftsman Days taking place on just about every server. So we're kind of happy to see that one taken off. And what we basically do there is we gate in people from the different cities, and we offer free item creates, repairs, enhances, that kind of stuff. If we have the materials on hand, we'll go ahead and give the item to the person, including the materials. If they bring the materials with them, we'll crank out pretty much whatever they need. And then about once a month we do what we call a lottery event, which again is another free event. It's open to everybody on the server, and we put up 25 prizes of fairly significant value. We give away houses as grand prizes, million or multi-million gold checks as grand prizes, and in between there you've got rares and artifacts and all that good kind of stuff. And we give away 25 of those to people that show up, and those tend to draw anywhere from 100 to 200 people. And again, we'll gate people in and out to those events. And then once in a while, we'll throw in other events, like we'll do scavenger hunts or great races around the world, or quests or things like that we'll toss in for the community. And whenever we do those, we keep them free and we keep them open to everybody. I mean, we have people come up from guilds that we regularly bash heads with at the champ spawns, but as long as you're not trying to ruin the event, you're there to have a good time, it's open to everybody.
That is definitely the spirit, and I understand like 100% where you're coming from with that one, because it's pretty much the same for me. I do organize events for the community in Atlantic, and I do run a failed guild, and so I see a lot of enemy guilds actually showing up for the events. But like you said, as long as the people that come up there are there for the event, not to wreck it, not to be jerks or whatever, then by all means, the more the merrier. The question I have for you, though, is how do you fund these events? Does it come out of your pocket, or do you have like a guild fund set up that provides for it? How do you go about it?
All of the events are funded by our members. If we want to do a lottery, we will simply say, hey, we're going to have a lottery coming up, and we usually about 2 weeks notice, and say, who wants to donate prizes for it? And it's amazing. People will come up with just some outstanding items that I'm sure they could sell on their vendors for a lot of gold. But again, the idea is to do something fun for the community, so everybody digs into their stashes and donates things, and it's pretty easy to put together a lottery. We often end up with more prizes than we actually had to give away.
That certainly is awesome, and it is the best way to go about it. And when people have the heart in the right place, you can see things coming together fairly quickly. So, way to go! That's really a great thing that you guys are doing for the community. Now, moving on to more of the real life events, it is my understanding that you guys, I think it's once a year, have a real life get together with your members.
That's correct. For the past 4 years, we have done a conference each fall, and besides that, we do a number of LAN parties and dinners and that kind of thing throughout the year. I mean, every month we have a dinner in Northern Virginia. We just had one last night in Pennsylvania that about 20 members attended, and we do a lot of those kind of smaller events all year round. But once a year, we have a very large event. Anywhere from 100. This year we had 120 plus members show up, plus spouses and kids occasionally come as well. And that lasts usually for 4 days. And we invite developers to come along and speak to us and have a good time with them. This year, Wilkie and Mr. Tack were there. And it was in Myrtle Beach. It was actually just back in the middle of September. It's a pretty good time.
And so how did that go? I know that some of our DJs wanted to go down there, but unfortunately we didn't have anyone to actually cover it. So what all happened? We're kind of curious about it.
It was a good time. It was always fun hanging out with Wilkie and Mr. Tact. Seeing Wilkie drunk is always a trip. He's a very mellow drunk. Mr. Tact, when he gets hammered, he's a pretty wild guy. This year we did we always have a big guild meeting. It always takes place on Saturdays, where we kind of talk about the major things that happened in the year, but more importantly, kind of where we're going over the next year, and that gives members a chance to directly ask me questions and get answers, and and hear about projects that we have upcoming as a guild over the next year. And we, of course, talk to the developers that show up at that time, too, in a more formal setting. Our thing for the past couple of years has been we like to play paintball on one of the days. We had a big paintball game. There is a company that is putting out a book, and they're doing a worldwide photo tour of alternate egos, basically your real life picture versus your game picture. And they were looking for a massive guild to do a group picture of, and they knew of us. So they showed up, and we did a massive group picture with them. I think their site's alterego.com. And I actually just went live this week. But they're doing photo expositions all over the world. So we had that event going on. We did a big beach cookout. Never seen so much chicken before in my life. And I think Wilkie is still pissed off at me because as he was going back to the airport, he stupidly left his bag unattended. And, well, somehow a few dozen pieces of chicken ended up in his bag for him to take home to California. I told him I was just leaving him a lunch, but he didn't quite see as much humor in it as I did.
Oh, my goodness. Yeah, that probably was... Actually, it would have been a sight for sore eyes just to see the look on his face when he found the chicken that you had left for him.
And Mr. Tack said it was kind of funny at the airport to watch him going through his bag, pulling out piece after piece after piece of chicken and throwing it away.
Yeah, I can just imagine. He was probably expressing his love for you at the time. But so, any scoops that were revealed there during, during your little one-on-one time with them during your get-together?
Most of the scoops at the time had dealt with Mondane's legacy, and we kind of put all those out on the Stratix boards once we got back, just to give everybody a heads up. We did ask him questions about things like, upcoming expansions and stuff, and Mr. Tack was real open and honest, and he said that at the current time their focus was more for the near term in getting bugs fixed and getting, patches out, not on the next expansion right now. And he said that was pretty much because of some of the turnover of programmers. So they're working to in essence, train up new people and get them going on the team. And then they'll look at the longer-term plan in terms of expansions and that kind of thing. So I thought that was kind of interesting because the focus had shifted a little bit since the town hall meeting that they had in D.C. But yeah, it was a really interesting time. It was really nice to be able to talk to him one-on-one and be able to really, give them feedback on our opinions and know that it's listened to. I mean, I do know they read the boards, and they were really clear on that at the conference, that they do really read the boards and they do see what people say. But it's real hard when you're just a writer on the board to know that they've seen your feedback and know that they're actually considering it. So it was very nice at the conference to be able to talk directly to them and know they heard your words. And Mr. Tack walks around with a black notebook and a pen, and so he writes things down all the time. So he's heard you because he's actually taken notes about it.
Oh, wow. I actually didn't know that. But, I guess right now you guys probably got a lot of guilds going, how the heck did they pull it off? How did they get the dev members to actually show up at one of their get-togethers? Was this the first time a dev member, a couple of the EA team actually showed up, or has that happened in the past?
I'm actually Binky's love child, and so that's how it happened.
And cash payments.
But yeah, this was the first time that EA had shown up. In the past, we've had developers from other companies there. This year, we're still huge into UO, and the guild really wanted to talk to UO developers, so I sent Binky a message, and it was about the time they were doing Marquee Dragons event. So there's a little bit of precedent there in terms of sending a developer out to a player-type community event. And I asked if they could come, and Binky said absolutely, and he went up the chain and talked to the various people, got permission, and they sent 2 people, one being Wilkie and one being Mr. Tact.
Well, that is very cool. Viceroy's light is like, a very angry shade of red. So I think.
Yeah, actually, I was kind of curious about the chicken and everything. Yeah, and I wanted to like you do a little follow up with you on the chicken and everything. Did he by any chance get like tackled by the security guards and all that through customs and all that?
We did have a couple members come over from Germany who were not so happy that at every turn they seemed to get checked and double checked and triple checked by customs trying to get home.
Oh, okay. So in a way, it's kind of like that little commercial with the Lone John Silver where they're going, oh, it's real shrimp, right?
Absolutely.
All right. Yeah, I just had to go off topic for a little bit, because I do like chicken, so I wish he would have brought some of that over here to Texas and everything. But I do have a question about, some of the things that went on there, at the event which you guys had in real life and everything. I'm actually kind of curious as to what kind of questions you guys asked, some of the questions in which were being asked, and then some of the things that have been discussed, because what I'm going to do come this upcoming Saturday and everything, as you probably know, just a little while back we had the Chicago UO Town Hall meeting, and what I'm going to be doing is inviting some of the people over from the UO Chicago Town Hall meeting to come over here on a talk show with us and basically discuss with us some of the things that were asked of the developers, some of the ideas thrown around and stuff like that. So I was kind of wondering if maybe you could do the same and share with us a little bit as to what was discussed and stuff like that.
Sure. We actually came prepared. We actually had a 3-page document that we had of all of our questions and ideas and things kind of laid out for the developers that we wanted to run past them, and gave them both a copy of it and then proceeded to beat them senseless for 4 days. A lot of the questions occurred one-on-one where people would just pull the developers aside and talk to them. So I wasn't there for all of them, but like, for example, in the meeting, probably the funniest question was we have this one member who's pretty hung up on the fact that he really wants pets to be able to be rezzed by casters, and he was rather upset that he could not resurrect his pet with his mage, and how stupid that was. So he asked that question of Mr. Tact, and Mr. Tact gave him a polite answer back, and he asked the question again, and he got a slightly less polite answer back, and he asked the question a third time, and Mr. Tact told him it wasn't happening right now, but he'd take it as a note, and he proceeded to ask that question 5 or 6 more times throughout the meeting, and to the point where I think after everything was said and done, I sent them all a thank you letter and included in there asking when pet reses would be implemented. But yeah, that was probably the funniest question. But we asked them a lot about PvP, what was going to be changing there. We spoke a bunch about upcoming expansions and ideas. I mean, people tossed out, hey, we'd love to see a pirate theme, and people were tossing out questions about could we have other races, could we have dwarves and elves and that kind of dwarves and gnomes and that kind of need to go along with the elves. And their comment there was that at the present time they weren't looking at adding any other races, but certainly down the line that becomes possible. We asked about the quest system, if they're going to be expanding that to work into other areas of the game. One of the big comments they had there was that the quest system was going to be used to help new players, especially in the near future. Mr. Tact was pretty upfront about it, and he said, we don't have any trouble selling the game. The game moves off the shelves of the store pretty rapidly. What they seem to have trouble with is retaining those new players long term. Those of us that have been around forever, we tend to stay. The newer players come in, and there's a significant percentage of them that don't stay around. So he made a number of comments that they want to work on UO to make it easier for the newer players to overcome the learning curve, and more likely that they're going to stay on. And the quest system certainly does that, because they could, for example, create a quest that walks you through the entire process of mining your ore and smelting it and creating that item and selling it. And they can basically walk you through the entire learning process in little tiny chunks versus, hey, you've got this skill tree and it's got this skill in there called mining. What the heck do you do with it? Hey, I got some rocks. What do I do with those? So they have a lot of ideas there that he was discussing to basically focus UO more on the new player in the near term to keep them around longer, which I think in turn benefits us all, because the larger the community gets, the more fun it is. I'll stop here because I see Amanda wants to say something.
Yeah, thanks.
Sure thing.
Sorry, thanks, Dee. Yeah, we as a guild facilitate, I think, new members. We, guild Dee implied, that recruit the player, not the character. And I often see a lot of what I would consider very rudimentary questions about the game in guilds, say, which I categorically ignore, by the way. But they're answered, and we generate an atmosphere of learning, and we help new players out. We take them under our wing, and they help them grow as players within the guild and within the larger UO game.
All right. And so, and talking about the some of the questions in which were asked and everything, I'm sure there was a lot more things in which were probably asked. Could you maybe elaborate a little bit more, so we can maybe, because, I mean, I want to, when I'm asking these kind of questions, when I'm asking you to pretty much, I don't know how much you remember or whatever, but, basically I want to try to put the listeners like as if they were there, like recalling events, that took place, almost to the point where you can almost describe to them exactly, how the event was and everything, and stuff like that, so I mean, if either one of you guys can like recall stuff like that, like certain details that you were quite amused with, basically the highlights and maybe the lowlights and all that good stuff. Dragon?
Well, there was that night on the beach when Mr. Tact was drunk and that 16-year-old girl beat the crap out of him, but we don't need to go there.
Oh my God, that right there is just a little bit hilarious and everything. I could just picture that. Yeah. Okay. And anything else you want to maybe share with us a little bit?
I'm scanning through my notes right here, and I see a number of the things that we had tossed out to them as suggestions. I can roll down a few of those as things we were interested in them considering for the future. One of the big ones that I had was I really wanted them to consider adding a message of the day type feature to UO. I mean, they already have in the GUMP. You can already put your charter, your website, that kind of thing, but there's really no place that you can put a little note up for your entire guild to see. Yeah, most guilds have forums, and certainly everybody can use email, but it'd be real nice if when you got in game, a little yellow text rolled up your screen and said, here's the message of the day set by one of the officers. So I had put that request out to them. We had asked them to consider working on runics and trying to make those more appealing to players. Right now, I mean, a lot of people are kind of burnt out on them. Whether it's the chance to successfully enhance your item, going up better with a runic, or the chance to get better properties, things these other MMOs did. They've all had the advantage of taking all the things UO created and using them, plus coming up with new stuff. UO, in some ways, has to play catch-up there in considering adding some of those features in. So a lot of our suggestions came from things like that. I mean, some players talked about, for example, adding an auction house, so that you had the ability, if you didn't own a house and you didn't have a vendor, that you could put your items up for sale in there. Adding an in-game email system similar to what WoW has, so you can send a note to your buddy and he can get it online. Maybe you don't feel comfortable giving somebody your actual email address outside the game, or you don't want them to have your ICQ number. Maybe you don't even use ICQ. So maybe if there's an in-game email, you could send somebody a note. Lots of suggestions along those lines. So that was a pretty hot topic for the conference.
Yeah, unfortunately I just lost connection here for a minute, so all the people out there who were just tuned in, they just got dropped. They just got slammed and everything. So what I'll probably end up having to do is get a copy of this interview from you guys, because mine won't be a complete copy, unfortunately. So I missed part of it, so I do apologize for that. So... And I don't even know where to, start from here. So, Sakara, you want to pick up from here and, kind of like pick up where I left off or whatever?
Yeah, no problem. I was just thinking, oh my god, I hope it's just a temporary thing that he's dropped, because he's also the one that was broadcasting this. So I was like, oh my god, the people listening must be going, ouch. I'm sorry. I'm looking at IRC at the same time that I'm talking, and Manny's like abusing me as usual. But anyways, yeah, Dragons was telling us about some of the questions that they had been asking the developers while they were there, and some of the stuff was really, really great. And what did they answer regarding that auction house that you guys were mentioning? Was that something that they thought that maybe we could be seeing? Because there's quite a few auction houses in game right now, but there is a number of problems with them. And so are they actually considering maybe implementing an auction house that would be kind of ran through the game?
A lot of the questions we asked, we simply got polite answers to. They took notes on them. In some cases, they flat out said, listen, that's probably not going to happen. But in a lot of cases, it got scribbled down as a note to be taken back and discussed. They were very careful, though, not to commit to anything. I mean, the UO community especially is very apt to hold the developers to any promises they make. They're noticeably cautious about committing to anything. They're certainly very open to ideas. They were definitely open to discussing them, and they often would hit us back with points we hadn't considered that are potential downsides to it. So there was a lot of back and forth discussion, a lot of fleshing out of ideas, and certainly they took back a lot of notes. But no, they did specifically say, hey, yeah, auction houses are something we can do. And we certainly talked about them, and there were pros and cons to it. Of course, one of the cons being that it could potentially undermine player auction houses, but there were a lot of pros to it as well. But no, they didn't specifically say, hey, yeah, we're going to go back and take this idea and start working on it. It was just simply something we put on their plate and said, hey, this is something that interests us, and they got to get a good feel for the percentage of people there that really liked the idea and didn't like the idea, and to kind of take it from there.
Well, yeah, I kind of expected that much, because you're right about this one. Whenever the dev team makes the mistake of even implying that maybe they would do something, all of a sudden people kind of start expecting that it's set in stone and that they are definitely going to do it, and then they start flipping out when it doesn't get delivered at all, or if it doesn't get delivered in the time frame that they wanted. But I think Viceroy has now remembers what he wanted to ask you guys, so go ahead, Mike.
Yes, thank you. And, before I got rudely disconnected by my ISP and everything, I did hear you mention like a message of the day type system and everything like that. And I'm kind of curious, did you maybe get the idea from another online game out there? Because I think, if I'm not mistaken, I think World War II Online has something like that. And would you also like to perhaps see maybe a notification type message from a system or whatever whenever a fellow guildmate logs into the game or something like that? Wouldn't you like to know when somebody logs into the game or something like that?
Well, the logging in and out thing tends to annoy me. They have that in World of Warcraft, and frankly, when you have a guild with hundreds of members and people are logging in and out, it just becomes spam, so you end up turning it off. I mean, it's nice if you have a guild of 10 or 15, then you know when your buddy's logged in, but when you have so many people in your guild, that ends up being annoying. For the message of the day, yeah, most of the other MMOs out nowadays have that as a feature. For some of them, it's a pop-up box that you can close. For other ones, it's a command you can type and it'll flash up. And on some of them, it just comes up when you log in. But just about all MMOs out there now, with very few exceptions, have a message of the day feature. And it's extremely useful because you can put up, doing a champ spawn tonight at 8 o'clock, everybody meet at such and such a location. And then if somebody doesn't read their email or doesn't check your posting form or isn't in the IRC server, then they have the ability to get that information. So I think it, in concept, sounds like it's pretty easy to implement, and I certainly hope that they do.
All right, and I do want to cover a few other things with you guys. You mentioned that you've introduced some other things like the auction house system and stuff like that. I'm kind of curious, have you by any chance introduced maybe the concept of something like, maybe a pre-UR? Was that ever discussed, during this little conference which you guys had with the developers? Was that ever even mentioned? And just exactly how far ago was this a little conference which you guys had, or this little event in real life that you had, just to basically fill in the people in real life?
The conference was middle of September, so it was that second weekend of September, the weekend just after Labor Day. And yeah, we did bring up the whole, can we have an old shard with the old rule set? The pretty standard question that gets brought up at just about every town hall meeting, but the answer was the same to us as it has been in the past, which is basically no. I think the reality of the situation is there's a vocal minority that asks for that, but there really isn't an overwhelming population of people that want that. and there's the added issue that it just gives them additional code bases to maintain. I mean, it makes total sense when you sit down and listen to somebody as fluent in the game as Mr. Tact. He can tell you the ins and outs of everything about UO in plain, simple speak, so even I can understand it. But it makes total sense when you sit down and listen to him. And it's just, UO is code that is more than 10 years old. It began years before it ever went live. It is been worked on by numerous development teams, and it's a challenge to maintain. So if you wanted to roll everything back to then, yet still give people certain neato, keen advancements and enhancements, new monsters, new dungeons, that kind of thing, it would be very challenging to maintain that code set from 5, 6, 7 years ago, as well as maintain the current game. You would need a much larger staff, and frankly, games are a business. So you have to be able to justify all the extra cost of those people in that time by revenue. I mean, if there's the revenue there, I'm certain they'd consider it. But it's hard to think about it in business terms. It's hard to think that you could justify running that other shard for a subset of the server population with all the additional man hours you need to maintain that code.
Yeah, that's a very good point that you make there, and I actually did think about that at one point in time and everything. But that leads me to my next question here and everything. I'm actually kind of curious as to whether or not you actually like the game now with the item-based properties, or did you like it prior to the AOS and everything like that?
Good question. My personal preference is I preferred it pre-AOS. I kind of liked it back when the items were less like they are now. With that said, I do know a heck of a lot of people actually like it the way it is now. It's a little more Diablo-like in the itemizing. There's a little more variety out there, and then it's kind of neat to go out hunting for that item with a couple more percent in a certain area that you really want. So it does add a certain level of depth to the game. But I personally liked it when it was a lot simpler with vanquishing, power, force, weapons, and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and I can relate to this because, who wants to go out and spend about several hours trying to, get equipped to go out and do something when you can, prior to AOS and everything, could go out and simply, get all the stuff and have it in another 15 minutes or so and be ready to go. Yeah, so I can definitely totally relate with you on that. And let's see, Amanda has a comment, so go ahead, Amanda.
On that note, I think we can refer back to Wilkie's recent post on Stratix regarding the major changes he has in mind for PvP. So it's all subject to change, as we know, and as we've seen if we played for any amount of time.
Yep, very good point. And I got a question for you, as a matter of fact, Amanda, and I'm kind of curious, why do you choose a female's name, if you don't mind me asking?
Well, Viceroy, if you look closely, you'll notice that my name is actually, if it's were a sentence, it's a man to reckon with. I'm not truly aggravated. I do that as a joke. I get that a lot in my guild. But it was just something I heard on the radio, and I stole it, and I use it.
Very good response. I didn't really look at it that way, and I'm glad you pointed that out to me. I can think of a bunch of other similar names that could actually make out something else, but I think I better steer away from that because I'll actually end up getting myself in trouble. I don't know if Darkly ever figured out how to get his microphone working. Maybe that's why he's got his little channel commander on. So I guess we can give him a try. Darkly, you have anything you want to say?
Guess not.
Yeah, I guess not. Well, it was worth a try and everything. Let's see. And what you guys, and leads me on to another question here and everything.
It's not working?
Yeah, it's working now. Hey, go ahead and say whatever you want to say.
Check, check.
Yep, go ahead.
First time why my microphone wasn't working.
Okay.
But I have to agree with Amanda. First, everybody was wondering why he had a female's name. A lot of people asked him if he was female. But I have to agree, I really like his name.
Those,
Yeah.
especially those people from the South, asked a lot.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I think it's like a typical type of question down here in the South and everything, because you just have to wonder, you know. I think there's more of a stereotype against a guy going around with a female name down here. But yeah, you know, Darkly, another suggestion is turn your, voice activation to push to talk, and that'll work a lot better. And so let's go ahead and move along to our next topic here and everything. Dragons. Basically, what are your thoughts on the whole chat system, and what kind of things would you like to see changed in the game to basically improve your guild or better improve the gameplay for your from your own personal perspective and stuff like that?
From our perspective, we've been using IRC for years, so the in-game chat is not really of... It's not something we use a whole heck of a lot. It would be nice to enhance just the straightforward chat that you get in the game that scrolls up your screen to make it so you can somehow scroll back in that, maybe putting that little window on top of the game that you can kind of scroll back in there a little bit easier. But overall for the chat system in game, whether it's Guild Say or Party Chat or whatever, we use TeamSpeak, we use IRC, and we've been using those for years. So we're pretty set in our ways with those. So, one way or the other, the game chat system, whichever way it goes, isn't really going to affect us too terribly much.
Yeah, very good point. Sakura, do you have any questions for Dragons or any of the other guests we have here?
Actually, I do have a question regarding that get-together, because you mentioned that it lasts 4 days, and I'm like, whoa, that must cost a pretty penny to get all these people together for so many days. Do you actually, I'm assuming all you guys go down to a hotel or something, and do you manage work out some sort of a package deal so that you can get something very interesting at a reasonable price? Because you did mention that you got a little over 100 people there, so how do you work that out?
Yeah, we definitely work with the hotels to get a group rate for the hotel. We try to stick to a hotel that's reasonably nice, someplace you'd want to take your family to on vacation if you were going to go, but someplace that's affordable because people are coming for 3 to 4 days, sometimes 5. I mean, technically, most of us are there from Thursday through Monday, so that's almost 5 days. We also try to work out a deal with the hotel so that we can extend before or after the conference for several days, so people can make a family vacation out of it. Some people have their families come down before or after, and they just stay in the area and just make that their yearly vacation.
Yeah, because I was thinking, it's like, wow, I mean, we are talking about 4 days, and how do you choose the location itself? Do you kind of, because I don't really know what locations you guys have been going to from year to year. As I understand, it's your 4th year of doing this. And do you actually pick a place that's more central to everybody, or do you just basically go with the place that's more affordable?
We've done Washington, D.C., we've done Orlando, Florida, we did Las Vegas, and this past year we did Myrtle Beach. The kind of the criteria I use for picking it is a place you might go if you're going to take your family for vacation, and a place that has a number of interesting, fun things to do. We pretty much do something every day, whether it's dinners or cookouts or paintball or racing NASCAR go-karts or whatever the heck the place has to offer. We try to get something going every day, and it has to have enough hotel facilities that we're able to find one that is a nice enough place at a good enough rate. And once we'll usually narrow it down to 1 or 2 or 3 places, and we'll put up a poll on our posting forum and let people give their feedback, and then we'll ultimately pick one. We're currently working on next year's place, but we haven't settled on anything yet, so we don't have really anything to announce there. But yeah, that's how we go about it.
Makes sense, and you're right that it would definitely make sense for people to actually use that as their 1 yearly vacation, even though I guess it makes it a bit more of a challenge for you to pick the right time to actually do this so that people can, organize things so that you can all take that time off together. I have a question here for you from IRC, and it's from Sketchy, and he would like to know more about your corporate sponsorship, and I actually have to say I was curious about that. One of my own guild members had mentioned at one point that you guys actually have corporate sponsors, and so how did that come about?
Well, when we were in the Shadowbane beta, long story short, the town next to ours was run by all the developers. They had their own little guild. They ended up becoming a sub-guild of ours in Shadowbane, and we ended up becoming good friends with all the developers there. And one of the Shadowbane developers' brother runs our corporate sponsor, Thunderbox. And we became real good friends, and we talked over the months, and eventually worked out a deal where he's our corporate sponsor. He'll do things like he'll send us prizes and giveaways for the conference or for our LAN parties. He gives members good discounts on PCs, and he even runs a couple specials where people come in and say they're referred by us and they get miscellaneous cool things for free. But yeah, it came about simply because we met him when we were playing back in Shadowbane and became good friends, and he was looking to sponsor somebody and we were looking to be sponsored, so it worked out pretty well.
Wow, that's actually a pretty sweet deal you guys got going there. But I have to say, I'm a little curious. How did the developers become a sub-guild of your own guild? Shouldn't it be the other way around?
Well, there were only 8 of them, and there were 300 of us, so,
And so what was it exactly? Were they like kind of allied, or it's just that, you guys would do things together from time to time?
No, in that game there you can declare alliances and sub-guild status and that kind of thing, and they actually had sub-guilded to us, and there were a number of reasons for it. One, we had become friends. 2, our towns were next door to each other, and 3, we were at the time the biggest guild running around there, and they really wanted to test town warfare and the ability to crush other towns, and we certainly had the forces to do that. So it was a partnership on a number of levels. But we still talk to, even though we're not playing Shadowbane, we still talk to them on a regular basis. I just got a email from one of them this past week updating his address book and giving everybody an update on his life. So yeah, we still talk on a pretty regular basis.
That is pretty sweet. I think Amanda wants to comment on this. Go ahead, Amanda.
Dee, don't forget to mention all the gold that they do for us. That's just a joke.
Yeah, I can imagine. Viceroy's light is on. I don't know if it's because he actually wants to say something or if he simply forgot to turn it off. Are you there?
Yep, I'm actually here, and I actually do want to ask something. Basically, I got 3 questions for you guys. Basically, what server did you guys play on Shadowbane? Because I played on Treachery and everything. I was a thief and everything. Loved the game for a while until they decided to reset the servers and everything. Basically, a server wipe. That didn't sit with me too well. But I'm kind of curious as to what server you guys played on when you guys did play Shadowbane. And my next question is just how many people do you guys usually have that turn out for these real-life events on average? And third of all, do you guys have like people who sometimes cannot afford to pay their way, and that maybe you guys help pull together like a fundraiser to help get somebody else there or something like that?
All right, first question. We actually only played through the beta. We didn't actually go in once it went live. In our opinion, the game just lacked way too much to keep it interesting for us for the long term. We tend to only pick up games that we're going to be in for the long term, and just Shadowbane wasn't going to be it. So we only stayed through the beta and finished helping them test the guild content and large siege warfare and that kind of stuff. And once we finished that up, we didn't go into it when it was live. Second question, we have anywhere from 100 to 130 members show up at those. And then, of course, there's spouses and kids that come along as well sometimes. There's usually not too many of those because, frankly, I don't think most of the spouses really care too much that their significant other is playing games and wants to go hang out with a bunch of us geeks for 4 days. And the third question is, yeah, we do occasionally have people that really want to go but can't, and we do tend to try to help them out. There are members that will give funds to help somebody come along. this next year. One of the places I'm looking at as a possible hotel is considering giving us comped nights based on how many people we have sign up, and we're going to use those if we end up going that route to in essence raffle off to let people attend that couldn't otherwise attend.
Wow, that's very interesting. So you guys no longer play Shadowbane, right?
Correct.
All right. And back to you, Sakura.
Okay, I do have a question here that somebody reminded me of. It's something that I did wanted to ask you about, and it's one comment I've heard quite a few times from people that at one point considered joining LLTS and ended up not joining it because of that one rule where you basically demand that every single character of that person be put in LLTS. What's the reasoning behind that?
That's pretty simple. We don't recruit the character. We recruit the person. We're not interested in a toon. We have absolutely no need for more toons in game. We have hundreds of members. They've been with us for many years, so we have absolutely no need to add more toons or warm bodies to the guild. We're looking for good people that we're friends with, people that are going to be members for years to come, people that we're going to be able to go to these conferences with and hang out. So we don't recruit the toon, we recruit the person. And in our mind, that means the person is committed to our guild and nobody else's guild. There shouldn't be a conflict of interest where somebody, for example, might be in a guild that we're hostile with, and they play that character that fights us sometimes, but yet helps us other times, because that really breaks down the whole trust relationship in the guild. I mean, the underlying foundation of our guild is the fact that we don't have any infighting. Nobody backstabs anybody. Nobody rips anybody off. Nobody steals from anybody. There is no personal attacks. There is no infighting. It's a giant group of friends, and they're all really close. If you bring somebody in and allow them dual membership in another guild, first of all, you're only recruiting their toon, not really the person. And second of all, you are undermining that trust relationship. You don't know if they are negatively impacting your guild by actions are taken in the other guild. They might simply be using you to advance themselves, or you may be, for example, let's say out of a champ spawn, and then they show up as their red character and kill you. That pretty much crushes the trust and crushes the friendship when that kind of stuff happens. So yeah, we do only allow membership in our guild, and we are only interested in people that really want to fully commit to us for the long term. We have no interest in recruiting anybody for the short term, and no interest in recruiting anybody simply for their character skills or some aspect of the game that they enjoy playing.
I partially agree with you on this one. I'm going to let Amanda make his own comment, and then I will comment on what you said. Go ahead, Amanda.
Adding to what D. Dragons said, we have a website that's private, and we've had people from other guilds join and then use that against us, and that they'll sabotage events that we host, etc. So that's a reason we request that people have all their characters in the guild.
I can understand that, and like in my own guild, I do not demand that all my guild members have all their characters in my guild, but at the same time, they also have very strict rules as to what other guilds they can join. The number one being that you cannot be in my guild and be in any other fel guild, because we are basically a fel-based guild. And if you're going to be in another fel guild, there's a very good chance that, it might be a guild that we will end up fighting, and we definitely cannot have somebody that's one day fighting alongside us and the next day fighting against us, because in that sense, you are 100% right. It will create a trust issue that simply will be detrimental to the guild, and we can't have that. But at the same time, the fact that we're a fel guild also means that we personally don't have much interest in crafting and any other such things. And so some of our members may say, well, I would like to join a crafters guild to, to hold a few crafter events and whatever. whatever they do in crafter guilds, I personally wouldn't really know. But, I personally wouldn't care if they wanted to do that because I'm like, okay, this is one of the aspects of the game that they might want to enjoy, and I don't want to deprive them from that opportunity. Everything else that's spell-related, we are Fel Guild. We can provide them with that. But everything that's more trammel-related, we can only partially help them with that. And for this reason, I wouldn't prevent them from doing whatever they want. So from my point of view, this is not something that I would want to rule. And I could see how certain people might not want to join because they're basically forbidden to enjoy part of the game because of it.
Well, sure, but look at it from this perspective. Two things. One, to set aside those rules would involve a lot of red tape in terms of maintaining it. And frankly, I don't have any time to maintain it and really don't want to have to maintain a set of rules on what people can be in and can't be in. It's pretty cut and dry the way we have it now. But second, we get more than 4,000 people a year that apply to join the guild. We only take a very small percentage of those. So from our perspective, we simply take the people that share the view that we do, that they are committing to our guild fully. With more than 4,000 apps a year, we can be a little picky in terms of who we choose. I'm positive there's some really nice people, some really great people that we haven't allowed to join because of that rule. By the same token, we have 550 pretty awesome people in the guild now. So we definitely don't. We're definitely not hurting ourselves because we have that rule in place.
When you put it that way, I kind of totally have to agree with you. Viceroy, I think, wants to comment on this. Go ahead, Vice.
Yes, I'm kind of curious as to how do you keep up with all the different characters of every person. Say you do have an incident where you have a troublemaker within your guild or something like that, and then you have on top of that, to complicate the problem and everything, you have all of this person's different characters in your guild. And unless you have some kind of system, to keep up with who's who, whose character is who, how do you keep up with all that? I mean, do you have like a database or something that's saying, oh, this person belongs to this person and so and so? I mean, I'm kind of curious as to how you resolve that kind of issue there before it really does become an issue in a situation where you had to remove somebody.
Well, two things for that. One would be we have a fairly strict recruiting process. I mean, if you apply to join the guild, it's going to be weeks before you get in. We don't accept anybody without an extensive review. You meet lots of members, you hunt with them, you have a good time with them, we get to know you real well. So in general, we don't tend to recruit people that are going to cause problems. We recruit people that are similar to us. Now with that said, there are certainly mistakes made or fights that happen and somebody goes off the deep end and they decide they want to do something against the guild. In that case, we maintain a database of everybody's character. There's absolutely no character added to the guild that I don't personally add, and every character I add gets recorded. I know who owns it, and I know all about the character, its stats, and everything else. So if anything happens, it's pretty easy to track it down.
I guess that answered Viceroy's question. And yeah, I know what you mean. We pretty much do the same thing when we have new members joining. We do write down all their alternate characters so that if something does happen, you pretty much have a list of all the characters and you know exactly who to remove and who to unaccess from the guild house and whatnot, especially considering if one of them totally goes berserk on you, you don't want them running around PKing your members AFK at banks or whatnot. So, yeah, I think any guild should keep records of alternate characters of their members, especially if you guild more than one of those characters to your stone. Amanda, go ahead.
Scar, you've made reference to your guild many times. Forgive me, would you tell us the name of your guild?
DEI.
Okay. I'll tell you this. We were under the impression that the GM for DEI was a female from France, but you definitely do not have a very thick French accent.
A lot of people, because everybody knows I'm French, but they all assume I'm French from France. I'm not from France. I'm French Canadian. So, but my accent shows up when I get really, really, really nervous. That's when it starts showing, or when you give me impossible words to pronounce. Then I get like really nervous, and it just becomes crazy and messy, and and people start making fun of me.
Well, you've given us valuable information in return. Then that's quite interesting.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's pretty much the same thing. Like as I was saying, for us, it is important to keep track of who your alternate characters are, and yeah, my guild is DEI, and we've had a few run-ins with your guild. So Luca, that's kind of. Sorry, I'm just reading the comment that that was posted in IRC. Yeah, I kind of wondered how you guys would react to knowing which guild I was in.
Yeah, it goes a lot along the lines of how we do our events. If nobody's there to screw up the event, then we have no problem with anybody. We bang heads at champ spawns, but that's the way it goes. That's the nature of the champ spawn.
Exactly, but it's actually interesting because the very first guild interview I performed here was with LNR, and that was interesting.
Hostile?
Borderline. Let's just say that it was kind of hard remaining impartial through it out. But we survived this. So anyways, yeah, you want to say something, Dragon?
I was just going to add that, our stance in the game is, we're certainly not a PK guild, and we don't support that as a play style. But by the same token, we are supportive of PvP, and if you don't have PKs, then you can't have anti-PKs. If you don't have people crashing champ spawns, then there's no point in having Feluca. So yeah, we have our issues with certain play styles and certain aspects of the game, like using cheats and exploits and that kind of thing. But you really do have to have all styles of players playing all aspects of the game to really make UO what it is. If you make UO purely Tremel, then you lose a whole lot of the important aspects of the game. So yeah, we may bash heads a lot in game, and I'm sure we've had our share of fights on characters and didn't even realize it was each other. But that's just all part of the game, and it's what makes UO fun.
Yeah, it does. But from my experience, a lot of the conflicts that we get, especially when we play in Fel, are usually due to misunderstandings and miscommunications. So, but it does add spice to the game either way. Viceroy, I think, wants to say something, so go ahead, Vice.
Yes, I'm actually, kind of surprised, how we can bring, people that are rivals with one another. And, yes, the LNR interview was quite interesting. I thought I was going to have to separate the two for a while there. But, yeah, I really think it's really interesting how you can bring two different parties that may have not gotten along really well and basically come on neutral terms or neutral grounds and basically be able to do a talk show like this or an interviews and so forth. And you have to realize it is just a game and everything at the end of the day, and not to take it so personally that you can't talk to one another. I think that's what makes these types of interviews so interesting because, people on both sides may not be on good terms in game, but come on the radio talk show or the interview, it's a totally different story. Go ahead, Amanda.
I'll agree with that. And what I found is a lot of the older guilds, DEI, Hot, and Sin, will de facto ally at champ spawns against LNR and 1 versus 1, and that's kind of fun. And again, without the conflict, without the competition, it really isn't a game.
Yeah, see, the problem is, and I guess we're kind of getting a bit off topic in a way here, but, when you do have alliances, and I think that's probably where it becomes interesting for LLTS, the fact that you're not officially allied to anyone gives you more freedom in what you can and cannot do. As an alliance, we do basically pledge allegiance to these other guilds and therefore stand by them. And sometimes they make choices and decisions that we do not necessarily agree with, but we are allied and we are loyal to our allies. And so sometimes it can create situations that are not necessarily pleasant, but I'm sorry, I have to stop looking at IRC. But, that's pretty much where you basically find yourself once you start creating these alliances. But there are a lot of upsides also being part of an alliance, and, you have to weigh the pros and the cons. And very often it's because there are so many pros to it that you basically go like, there's a few downsides, certain things that you may have to do that you don't necessarily like, but for the upsides, it's definitely worth it.
Frankly, I'm happy to have anybody in the game. We need people, and if they want to fight me, that's fine. If they want to be friends with me, that's fine, just as long as UO prospers.
God, my phone's ringing. Vice, can you take it for a second?
Sure. Yes, so I'm kind of like speechless and everything. But yeah, definitely interesting and everything. I was actually getting me a soda and everything because getting a little parched here. And but yeah, just trying to kill the time. Okay, you're back. Good.
I'm back. It's fine. Sorry about that. It's my beloved father that knows not to call me at this time, and he was like, "Oops, sorry." But anyways, so actually I should have waited a little longer just to see how Viceroy was going to suffer and and try to figure out what to do while I was AFK. But anyways, and so you see that's probably the one question for you guys, because I know your guild is pretty much diversified in what you do, and I can't help but wonder, how do you actually handle FAL? Because right now, most of the FAL guilds are really huge guilds. Most of them are very hostile. There's very few that will actually not attack you on sight. And, how do you handle it, really? Do you basically go there going, okay, we're going to go do a spawn. If we get it done, we get it done. Or, if it gets brutally raided, we're just going to go like, oh, better luck next time kind of thing. Like, how do you deal with it? And how do you get, especially your more trammel players, to keep going back? Yes, Amanda.
Well, you answered that, really. If we get raided, so be it. If we make it, that's great. We accept the FEL rule set for what it is, and we don't whine about dying and etc. So we have a good time. In regard to getting people into Felucca for champs, we don't seem to have much of a problem these days because we've had a lot of success in the last 6-9 months. And we have a good share of experienced players that PvP, and they support us. And if we get raided in large numbers, we take it on the chin. But otherwise, we hold our own.
And do you actually train your not your characters, but your guild members towards PvP? Is there like, do you guys have like fight nights or training sessions on a regular basis? Is any of that compulsory, if any, or is that pretty much left up to whoever wants to?
We don't have compulsory training, but we do have training. We do have fight nights. We do have sessions for people that want to learn PvP, whether formal or informal. For those that do want to learn it, yes, certainly we do pass the knowledge on, and we do have fun events like fight nights.
Good stuff. Darkly, I think you want to comment. Go ahead. Don't forget to hold your button because you tend to break up a little bit. Go ahead.
Yes, we do have a fight night once a week, which does allow a little bit of training. In the past, we had some PvP training, but it has slowed down a little since it is harder sometimes to get some of the trauma people to come to Felucca because of the raids all the time at Champs. But slowly getting there, slowly getting some more PvPers and starting to show up a little bit more against some of the group versus group.
Okay, you're back until you get a new sound card.
I was about to say that. Okay, basically what I understood him saying, because you were really breaking up a lot. My understanding of what he said was that they do have training sessions. They do have some basically PvP training sessions, but sometimes it is hard to get the Trammel people to participate in them. But there has been a few more groups getting together and getting the training going. So that's kind of what I understood, that it's been increasing on that front. And we talked about you guys doing factions a little bit, and you had mentioned how faction gets old and boring really quickly because it's basically not moving. It's the way it's been forever and ever, and it really doesn't seem to be going anywhere at this point. So the interest kind of comes and goes for it. Is there anything else besides factions themselves and PvP, I guess? Is there anything that you guys would like to see changed or improved in it? And what would be those changes if there's any?
Do you mean UO as a whole, or do you mean just PvP?
PvP as a whole. Not UO itself, but really right now it's more the PvP aspect and the factions aspect of it all.
I think a lot of players in our guild are like factions, but they're discouraged by what they perceive as some faults regarding bugs and things that give an unfair advantage. Or whether those are real or not, I don't know.
And PvP in general right now it's relatively the same thing that it has been for 8 years. So the root cause of it, it's not all that compelling anymore. I mean, there are certainly people that love it and that do it all the time, but you do notice a fairly high turnover of your heavy PvPers. The people you see at Champ Spawns, by and large, today are not most the same ones you saw 6 months ago or a year ago. There are certainly people, persistent people throughout that, but in general, you do notice a very high turnover in PvPers because, frankly, they get burnt out. I don't have a good suggestion for it. It's hard to make content like that compelling over the long term, because when you radically change it, you tend to alienate people that enjoy it. So it's certainly a challenging problem, but the problem is basically that it's been the same all along. Perhaps they can do more things that some other games have done. For example, and I'll use World of Warcraft as an example, they have themed battleground areas that you can go into and PvP towards a goal. And there's a number of them. They're adding more in. So perhaps they could add areas, dungeons, where there's a specific goal to do other than the faction goal of guarding the sigils for 24 hours, etc. But, more short-term goals where the matches last for a period of time. They already kind of have that technology to instantize things like with the Peerless bosses. Extend that to a larger area and do dungeons scattered around the world or areas set up around the world where when you are on one of the other teams and you PvP for a certain goal. And you may not end up on the same team as your buddy from your guild. You may be able to end up on a different team, and that'll force you to meet new people, and the experience will change up. But they need to do something like that to basically make the content, add some dynamics to the content. I mean, the content right now is, other than the fact that they change items and skill balancing occasionally over time, the content's the same as it was 8 years ago. So you need to do something to kind of spice that up.
Well, that definitely is a very interesting comment that you made there, and you're right. It's a lot of the same thing with just changes here and there that basically end up frustrating a certain group of players, and they get pissed off, they leave, while the other one is enjoying the ride for a little bit, and then they make a new change, which makes the old crew happy, they come back, but the new crew is not happy, so they leave. So it's just a constant roller coaster. So yeah, hopefully they will get to something that will make a lot more people happier on a more regular basis. And pretty much the same thing that you were mentioning that had been discussed in the at your get-together. And I think actually it's not just something, because you were mentioning that they were doing this for mostly the new players, that they want something that will keep the interest of the new players going for a long time. But I think that also applies to the vet members. Some of the really hardcore vet players like myself and you guys, I've been here through thick and thin, and, we're still around here. But then, there's a lot of the people that were there of old that, played for a year or two, and then they were like, that's it, I'm out of here. And so it would be nice to see these people also remaining with new content. And, gee, time is flying. We're already 15 minutes away from the end of the interview, so I see Viceroy's back, and I somewhat have the feeling that he wants to ask his infamous question, unless there's another one before that. So go ahead, Vice.
Well, it's not so much the infamous question or my signature question, which I normally ask, which is, well, I guess I'll go ahead and throw it out there. I think you pretty much answered it already, though. If EA was to pretty much introduce a pre-UR shard, would you play on it? And my other question, which I was going to ask, Sakura tells me I shouldn't do this, but, I'm going to go ahead and ask you two questions. First of all, would you play on a pre-UR shard if EA was to make one available? Second of all, it was actually about what do you think makes, players from the old days, stay? What did you think that made them stay? Like me and you, Dragons, Kara, and stuff like that. What do you think compelled us to stay through all those years to up to 8 years of UO? I'm kind of curious as to why are we having trouble now, in your opinion, retaining new players, whereas in the old days that didn't seem to be as much of a problem. So, starting with Dragon, go.
Well, on the pre-UO shard, I would say the Syndicate wouldn't be there. I mean, we're pretty much set up on Atlantic, so that's pretty much where we'd stay. That isn't a big battle cry of ours to set up that shard at all. I mean, I certainly know there are people that want it, but it's not a banner that we wave. In terms of why we stay, in my opinion, and I think this is one of the largest strengths that Ultima Online has, is that it's very freeform. You can do anything you want. There's no such thing as a class, per se. You can make your character. You can be a ninja with magic that craft tables on the weekend. I mean, you can do anything you want to do. I mean, you can be a beggar 24/7 if that's what you want to do. It's very flexible, and the flexibility pervades the whole game. You can set up your backpack anywhere you want. There's not 16 slots that you can put things in. You can set up your house any way you want. You can retain lots of little pieces of junk in boxes in your house that everybody does. I mean, they give you flexibility throughout the entire aspect of the game. You can put any numbers and skills you want. You can play the game any way you want. And the other big aspect is you can launch UO and do something in a very short amount of time. EQ is an example. If you wanted to really accomplish something playing EverQuest, you had to allocate a few hours of time to get it done. You can pop into UO in 15, 20, 30 minutes and actually do something and feel like you got in, had a good time, and accomplished something. You can certainly play for a lot longer, but you can play it in short spurts and actually get something out of the game. And I think the other added advantage is it plays on a crappy machine and it plays on a crappy connection. So you can play it even with older technology PCs, and you can play it pretty well. I mean, you're not going to be a star PvPer, but you can certainly go out and defeat most of the content on the game on a 56.6 modem on an older machine.
Yeah, and basically my next question was basically what do you think is lacking in the game now that, you know, like in the old days and everything, we stuck through all that and everything. What do you think compelled us to stick around through all that, you know, thick and thin? And what, you know, for us veteran players like Sakura, me, and you, what do you think compelled us to stick around for all these years? Whereas, you know, nowadays EA is supposedly having trouble retaining new players. So, what are your opinions on that, Dragons?
Don't you get a check in the mail each month from EA like I do for $1,000 to stick around?
Nope.
Oh, I guess I shouldn't have told you about that one. Sorry.
Gee, I'll take half. Amanda, go ahead.
I'll address that. Content is UO's strength and its weakness. I think that's what keeps a lot of players. On the other hand, as we've discussed, it drives new players off because, as Tack mentioned, they get discouraged at the complexity of the game. So I think if they follow through with allocating resources toward teaching the game within the game, we should hopefully see a bump in subscribership.
All right, and Sakura, you want to, you know, take over?
Yeah, yes, actually, we're almost over. So I guess the question for you, this one actually, is going to be about, is there any upcoming events that you guys have that will be taking place in the near future that you want to mention? Oh my God, I think we just lost Dragon. But yeah, is there any upcoming LLTS events on your schedule, public events that you guys want to put out there?
I have an unofficial event that I'm hosting where you give in-game gold to me personally. No, I'm kidding. You'd have to speak with Dragons. It looks like he lost connection. But watch the boards, watch Stratix. They'll post our events when we have them. So when you pop in there, take a look. And anything that's planned is usually pretty well publicized.
Alrighty. And yeah, the next question was kind of going to be for Dragons, but I guess you're now being put on the spot. So the question is actually, what is in the future for LLTS? You guys have already have a pretty long love story going on with UO, and do you also have do you have quite a few things going on with other games as well, but where do you guys want to be in a few years from now, besides hopefully still being in UO? What are the grand plans?
We leave the door open in that regard to other games. We look at the future of gaming, and it's only going to get much bigger. So it's really hard for us, because the future is so uncertain, it's hard for us to say as a guild where we're going to be. But Dragons has reiterated that we look at everything, and if we like it, we'll try it. It's about having fun. As long as we keep having a good time, we'll stick with something.
Well, that's definitely the spirit. Now, if you want to have, if people are interested in maybe reading more about your guild or even applying to join your guild, even though you guys have mentioned that they need to basically be people that you guys know, but there has to be a start somewhere. So if they want to find out more about you guys, what would be the website address that they could go and look you guys up?
Oh, I forget. I'm just kidding. I just did that to upset my GM. It's www.llts.org. www.llts.org. And there is an application page there in which one may apply. And Dragons looks at all the applications, and he refers some to recruiters and some he does not. But that's a good first step.
Indeed. And so that about wraps it up for me. I don't know if Viceroy has any other questions for you guys. If not, I will give you guys a chance to say your parting comments. Anything, Vice?
Nope, that pretty much about does it for me, so whatever you want to say.
Alrighty. So it was the interview with the Syndicate of Atlantic, LLTS. And I'm going to give, we lost their GM, unfortunately, probably lost connection. But I'm going to give Amanda Reckon with a chance to, I'm sorry, but every single time I'm going to think about your name now, all I will be thinking about is a man to reckon with. I just thought it was brilliant. So anyways, go right ahead if you want to make a farewell comment.
Absolutely. On behalf of my technologically challenged Grandmaster, thank you very much for having us. It was a joy. I look forward to seeing some of you in game. Amanda Reckermeth is one of my characters, so if you see me, feel free to PK me. Again, just thanks, and maybe we can come back with some time with more news.
Alrighty, thank you very much. Darkly, I don't know if you want to take a stab at saying goodbye, or if we're just going to say it for you, considering how much you break up. But I guess we'll just say Darkly was here. I believe he's another one of their squad leader. So thank you for being with us. It was great having you guys. And once again, it was the interview with LLTS from Atlantic. Geez, I'm sorry. My brain is just going berserk again. So thank you again for being with us. As usual, we have more of our community interviews every Sunday. The next guest will be confirmed during the week, so just keep checking our DJ schedule for the name of the guest that we will have, and it will be posted on Stratix as well. And so just to put it out there for all you people listening from Atlantic, I am hosting an event tonight at 7:30 Eastern Time. It costs nothing. Just come on over. It's going to be a lot of fun. So I hope to see a bunch of you guys out there. And once again, thank you to LLTS, and thanks to everybody in IRC that joined us as usual for our events. So thank you, everybody, and talk to you next time.